All right. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Right. Good morning, Westminster. Good morning, Boyd and Linda and Don and Carol.
Good morning, Ken.
It's so nice to be back in bikini weather.
Hello, everybody.
Always the optimist.
Oh my, I tell you, this is we've seen more movies in the last week than we've seen in the last 10 years, I think.
I think you're right.
Definitely.
So thank heavens for Turner Classic Movies, because there's always something on there. We watched A Student Prince yesterday, and it was a
Oh,
operetta, and it was a fellow named Edmund Purdom, I think, played the prince, and it's about a story about a prince who falls in love with a barmaid and then ends up going off to do his duty. But
Not the first time that happened, probably.
yeah. And I told Kitty, I said, that guy can really sing. I mean, it was just wonderful. And then I started fiddling with looking the movie up on my phone, and it turns out that the songs were all sung by Mario Lanza. If you remember Mario Lanza, and he walked off.
Pretty good voice.
He walked off the movie. He'd already recorded all of the songs, and so Purdon or whatever his name is was lip syncing all of those songs. And he did a really good job of it. So I don't know how many times they had to repeat some of those songs so that it would look natural, but everything looked natural. But once I realized it, I could see that the muscles in his throat were not moving, so he wasn't really singing very loud. What have you all been doing?
their lip Once you know they're lip singing, you watch and they never take a deep breath.
Yeah, that's right.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
They don't need to, but that's a giveaway too.
Yeah.
Well, it's just wonderful to have Don and Linda here as our guests. Don is an Austin native. How about you, Linda?
Fort Worth native. Can you hear
Is
me?
that right? And then, oh yes, hear you. Wonderful.
Okay, good.
And I just want to mention one movie real quick, and then we'll get to it. And that is Wild Mountain Thyme. This is an Irish play that was made into a movie, and really, really, really worth the watching. And I think we watched it on Netflix. And it's a story about this very reluctant farmer who's in love with a girl, but he can't express it. And this goes on forever and ever and ever. And finally, at the very end, I won't tell you what happens, but it's pretty happy ending. Anyway, it's beautiful photography and fantastic dialogue. And it's called Wild Mountain Thyme, Thyme.
Did you see it on Netflix, or where did you see
It
it?
was just charming.
Netflix.
Netflix,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
Okay.
Well worth
Right.
looking at. It's very charming.
Yeah.
Look it up.
Well, Don and Linda, it's so nice to have you with us. Thank you very much. How long you been at Westminster?
Well, we got our apartment first time in 2014.
But we were NIR,
Oh,
and then
wow.
how they say, not in residence. Yeah.
So anyway, we
Wonderful.
were able to
One,
move in here in 2000,
When did you move into your apartment in Windsor?
yeah, 2019.
January
January.
January
of
2019.
2019.
well, how did you, you were a native Austin, you left to go to Houston, and you were a doctor working with Dr. Cooley, Denton Cooley. Then you're back in Austin. So we'd like to hear a little bit about how you and Linda met, and where, and just a little bit about yourself.
Well, Lynn and I met the first day of University of Texas in
Oh, really?
1955.
Yeah.
And I was driving down the street with one of my new Pledge brothers from Fort Worth, and saw this pretty girl walking on the street. And I commented. He said, "Well, I know her." His name was Jimmy Settles. He said I was a cheerleader with her. So we stopped, and she got in the car, and here we are. 50 years later.
The rest is history.
Wow. So
Wow.
you were a pickup, huh?
That's it.
Cheerleader, huh?
A cheerleader. Wow.
Oh, yeah, that was
What high
fun.
school did you go to in Fort Worth?
Pascal, Pascal.
Haskell, yeah.
Yeah, it's still going strong too. Both my brother and sister-in-law have had children there, so they've really kept up, and it's going well, doing well for public school. It's done exceptionally well. Got a great percentage of.
How did you get into medicine, Don?
Pardon?
How did you get into medicine? How did you get there?
Well, let's see. I guess I started. Well, I was born here in Austin, and when we grew up in Austin, the population was less than 100,000. So Austin has really changed since we
Can you
were.
believe it?
My grandfather moved to Austin in 1903 after he came back from the Spanish-American War and opened a little cafe on Guadalupe, which was the first restaurant on the drag.
It was an institution. It became an Austin institution.
Yeah,
He
Charlie's Confectionery.
ran it, and while through the years, I've had numerous older men come up and say, you know, I never would have gotten through the university without your granddad. He let me run a tab the whole time I was here.
Wow.
I
Long
paid it
tab.
back over 10 years when I got out of school, but he never charged, and he just let me sign. So
That's wonderful. Did he fight with Teddy Roosevelt then? In this?
well, he wasn't actually in Cuba, but he was in the army then. He joined during that time in 1898. They had I guess a contingency from Giddings where he was born, and so then he came. He didn't see any action, but he was in the army there.
At Camp Mabry, wasn't he down?
Yeah, the Rough Riders trained here, I think, or something.
Yeah.
Before they went before the invasion.
Yeah, he said we used to march and march on that field. So anyway, I went to Austin High. When I was in Austin High, we only had one high school, two, I guess, if you count Anderson. So my sophomore year in high school, they built the second two schools, which were Travis and McAllen. And then I went to the University of Texas here. I was in Plan 2, and I got interested. You asked how I got interested in medicine. When I was in the 4th grade, I was in Dallas for some reason with my parents, and my mother stopped in a little bookstore, and I saw a little small anatomy book that I asked her if she would buy for me. And anyway, I got interested in anatomy and decided when I was in the 5th grade, I wanted to be a surgeon. So
Wow. Wow. How interesting.
had a,
Must have been some good pictures in that book.
well, it was all the muscles and the bones and the blood vessels. So anyway, Linda and I guess, got married the day we graduated from Baylor Medical School in 1962, and up in Fort Worth, which was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. My brother, who was going to be my best man, was serving on a destroyer during the blockade of Cuba, so he didn't get to come.
Wow.
We
No.
got married that first year and did our internship. I did a surgery internship, and then after the internship in '63, I got drafted. Back in those days, everyone went in the military. So Lynn and I both were shipped to Indonesia, and I was a medical officer with the American Embassy. Took care of the Marine Corps contingency, the diplomats, the intelligence people, and the Peace Corps, and all the USAID people. So we were there during a very interesting time in Indonesia in 63, 64, 65. And that was really the turning point of the Cold War. In September the 30th, there was a counter-revolution that was the breakdown of the Communist Party. The Communist Party in Indonesia was the second Communist Party founded in 1920 after the Russian Revolution. So they had a long history of controlling Southeast Asia. And when we were there, the Communist Party had over 5 million people, and it was looking like they were going to be able to take over the country. The Indonesia was a critical country. It was the 5th largest country in the world then. It's now the 4th largest country in the world, population-wise. It's the 3rd richest in natural resources, and was the reason why Japan had to bomb Pearl Harbor to try to get rid of the American Navy that was protecting Indonesia. Because Japan in 1935, when they started their war in China, United States and Britain, and of course we started blockading Japan and not letting them get to oil. So they had to stop their war in China in 1935 and said, well, we've got to take what they were calling their southern resource area, which was Indonesia, had all the oil and rubber. And then in 1941, they said, well, we've got to get rid of the U.S. Navy because we can't take Indonesia. And they couldn't continue the war. So Japan really saw Indonesia as the key to their World War II, which is the same thing that the Cold War saw it as, because it anyway, the Communist Party tried to take over the country in 1965 when we were there, and that was one of the bloodiest revolutions in history. Over 500,000 people were killed in that that effort, and at the outset, President Johnson had just increased the armaments in the United States involvement in Vietnam, and unfortunately, it was 6 months too soon. Had he waited 6 more months until the counter-revolution or the attempted takeover of Indonesia by the Communist Party, we would not have had to fight in Indonesia, in Vietnam. The Vietnam War, in my estimation, was really to protect Indonesia, because it was.
Were you doing heart surgery back then in Indonesia?
No, I had just finished 1 year of surgery training. I graduated from medical school. I'd done 1 year of a surgery internship, but heart surgery took another 7 years to learn how to do.
Wow.
Were you all ever in any, did you have any sense of danger to yourself or your family while the revolution was going on?
Well, the first day we got there in 1963, the Communist Party burned the American embassy, the British embassy right across the street, so that it was starting then. So there was mob activity the whole time. We felt pretty safe most of the time. Actually, the American government knew the coup was coming in 1965, and we evacuated all the American personnel that were non essential, and so we got all the USAID people. We had about 1,000 Americans working in USAID and USIS, United States Information Service, and so forth. So we evacuated all those. In fact, Linda was the last dependent out of the country. So to answer your
Wow.
question, we got out right before the
Wow.
everyone did.
Yeah.
So when you came back, did you start doing your surgery work again, studies?
Yeah, I came back in 1965. Came back when I'd left. I had to. It was interesting because I had we'd gotten drafted. Linda and I were getting ready to go to Mexico in June of 1962.
Three.
No, 2 a year. Anyway, our timing. No, you're right. 63. Linda's always right.
No.
Linda does
You were
something.
just sitting
If
there
I say
waiting.
something different, remind me to check with her on the dates. Anyway, so we were in our. I was down at the Mexican consulate getting a visa to go on our vacation, and Linda got a call at home and said that we were on the draft list. That called us from the Army Reserve and said that we were going to be drafted in 2 weeks. So when I had to go tell Dr. Dwecky, who was in charge of the residency program, he was the chief of surgery. Denton Cooley at that point was associate chief, but had the opportunity to work under both of them. But Dr. DeBakey was the boss. So I had to go. He had gotten me a position to work at NIH when we found out we were going. But I went and got this other billet. So I had to catch him in the morning. So I went out and I said, well, I'll go meet him in the parking lot when he comes in, so I'll have a chance to talk to him. He was busy and hard to get to talk to. So I went out and waited in the parking lot at 5 in the morning, waited 45 minutes. He never came. So I said he must have come in early, and sure enough, he'd come in. So the next morning I went out, I said, I'll get there at 4:30 in the morning in the parking lot. And I waited, and he never came. He'd already gotten there at 4. So third morning I went and got there at a little before 4 in the morning. He comes driving up at 4 and squeals the brakes and starts running into the hospital. I start running along with him and said, Dr. Becky, I need to talk to you.
It's 2 o'clock.
I really appreciate the residency position that which was going to start in 2 weeks, because I was scheduled to start in 2 weeks. And he asked me, I told him what I was going into the service and going to Indonesia. And he said, well, he said, go do your service and make me proud of you. And we'll have your residency spot when you come back. So
Nice.
when we got out of the service
Yeah.
in 65,
nice.
but we started, and I was there the next 7 years. So
Yeah.
And Linda
Wow.
worked.
When
She was
did
teaching school.
when did DeBakey and Denton Cooley go their separate ways?
Later, yeah.
Not too much later.
Well, it was pretty much at the end of my residency, honey.
Yeah.
4 years and
Yeah.
2
7
years, so
Mhm.
6 years later.
So did you have a choice to make then as to?
Yeah, that was a tough decision. Dr. DeBakey and Dr. Cooley had the classical father-son relationship.
Yeah.
Denton Cooley was Dr. DeBakey's protege, and he came after his residency at Johns Hopkins, and Dr. DeBakey recruited him down, and they worked for probably 8 years hand in hand and did all the early work together. And Dr. Cooley was the heir to the throne, so to speak. And like many father-son, situations, when Dr. Cooley got to the age in which he sort of wanted a little bit of independence, Dr. DeBakey unfortunately was not able to share the authority. And so Dr. Cooley broke away, which a lot of sons do when they're 40 years old. And so they had a break, and they didn't speak to each other for 40 years after that.
That's something.
And so, yeah, I had to make a choice. And so I had worked under both of them, and I chose Dr. Cooley. And so I didn't get to speak to Dr. DeBakey for 6 or 7 years after that until
Yeah.
Wow.
just a chance meeting.
Linda,
Yeah,
Linda,
yeah.
what were you doing all this time?
I was teaching school. I taught high school biology in the Spring Branch School District there in Houston.
So you're a scientist also then?
Yes.
I've wondered.
The good news was, Boyd, I could recognize all of the terminology because I studied a lot of Latin too.
Yeah.
And so I was able to edit most of those papers with him.
Oh,
That's why they want
That was
those-
good.
Yeah.
I sort of understood it a little, So that was a
So-
good thing.
So looking back at the history of heart transplants, I mean, back to when Christian Bernard, was that the guy's name in South Africa, did the very first
Right.
one. And but I know that, technique and learning had a lot to do with the development and success of heart surgery. But how do you account for the miraculous increase over those years? Is it technology? Is it skill? A combination of those things? Because it's really become. I mean, I don't think the first guy that the fellow in South, Dr. Christian Bernard operated on lived over 30 days or something like that. So.
I think it was a combination of that period of time in which technology and knowledge sort of all came together and allowed the opportunity for some of those early leaders to really take a chance. And it was scary business. And I remember when I was my first year with Dr. Cooley, after I finished my residency and I was working with him, he had a new operation that he was testing that he just developed. And the child, tetralogy of Fallot, which is a abnormality of the heart and chambers and requires a complicated operation. And so the first one he did that morning, he had 6 patients lined up for the day. We operated usually starting at 7 in the morning and would go oftentimes till 10, 11 at night. I rarely got home in time to watch the 10 o'clock news at night. So all those years, Linda would have supper. She'd leave it and it'd be 10:30 or 11
That's right.
most nights when I got home. But anyway, so I think it was hard work by some of the really great minds. Dr. Cooley and DeBakey, of course, were leaders, but there are many other surgeons around the country who all contributed. And one thing about medicine, unlike most other competitive fields, all the developments and knowledge were shared. And you reported, and every time a new technique worked, and you know, everyone in the country knew about it. So it wasn't a secret, patented, you know, technology. So I think it was just a combination of,
Yeah.
you know, that period in history.
And they were working at the same time on the immune system, and gaining so much knowledge to be able to keep rejection and so forth of objects that were placed inside the body that weren't, human tissue.
Mhm.
So that was a huge help too, wasn't it, Don?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a
And
lot of fields.
of materials that could be
Yeah.
used in the process, in the procedures, I'm sure changed a lot during that period of time.
Yeah, Dr. DeBakey tells the story in his book about, you know, a biography, I guess, about him, showed him when he was early young doctor. His mother had a sewing machine, and he would buy Dacron and sew these grafts. And he made his first grafts himself with his mother's sewing machine.
Really,
So
Yeah,
something. That is
that's hard to believe.
For vascular work. Yeah.
Well, since you've been here at Westminster, I've noticed you're in the Westminster Writers Journal with a poem called "The Darkness," about going into your body. Why don't you tell us about that poem? That's quite good.
well, that's so an analogy. How I got interested in that after I retired from my surgery practice after 30 years. I went back and was interested in the humanities, and I went back and studied poetry and got a master's degree in poetry from Vermont College, and so that little poem was one that I worked on. It's just the idea that we're all in life struggling to see the light and the truth, and so it was just a metaphor of a blood cell going in and being coursed through the body, and it was dark, and one's view of the world is limited, which is so I guess analogous to all of our efforts to understand the world and God and the whole universe. And so that one little cell that's floating deep in the body doesn't see anything outside his little surroundings, which is so the way I felt in life is that I only see the surrounding problems and people and situations, and so we're all struggling to have a greater vision of the world and the universe. And
It was a beautiful metaphor. It was a beautiful metaphor. I really enjoyed your poem.
Are you going to give us another poem for the next edition?
yeah, it's coming up in February. When's the deadline?
April. I think the deadline is the end of March, I believe.
March.
For submissions.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. I'll try to write one.
Good. Yeah, we want it. Well, you're quite a Renaissance man, so you're having an interest in history, I guess, also, as well as literature or poetry. So, and
Yeah. I went back, and when I was here at the university, I was in Plan 2, and I got accepted to medical school, sort of recruited after 3 years rather than 4 years. And so to save money for extra year of tuition, I went ahead and went to medical school after 3 years. So I didn't get my degree. And so after I retired, and just in 2014, when I came back, I re-enrolled at the University of Texas and finished up my degree, which I got in history. Plan 2 had changed, and anyway, so I switched to history because I could.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I noticed that. Linda,
Yeah.
did you study Latin at UT?
No, just all through high school. I didn't take a foreign language. I just kept on with the Latin, which I, of course, just rued the day because I don't have good Spanish even today, or French, or whatever. Indonesian, Donna and I can still speak a little with each other. They sent us to school here before we left, which was nice.
What's their dialect there? Is it Tamil or what do they speak?
Malay. It's a
Malay, yeah.
Malay-based language like Malaysia and so forth. Yeah.
And I guess they still
We
speak.
certainly enjoyed having you all. I'm sorry, boy, I was gonna say, we certainly enjoyed having you all with us today. You were nice to join us. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Good. Well, we need to have another talent show so that we can. I can't wait till we can all get back together again. I know everybody's that way.
Would you be willing to perform in it?
Oh no, I'm a great spectator though, and appreciator of those who are talented.
Well, she did one time when we were in Indonesia. President Sukarno, the ambassador, asked him to come and be the luncheon guest of the American Men's Association there, which included the diplomats, and as the medical officer for the embassy, we were invited. President Sukarno said, "Yes, I'll be happy to come to the lunch under one condition." And Ambassador Jones said, "Well, what's that, Mr. President?" And he said, "Well, I want the 12 prettiest women in the American community to meet me at my car and sit with me at my table." So anyway, Linda.
I made the cut.
So one of the 12 danced out and got him out of the car and, paraded in with him and sat with him at the table. He didn't.
Rotating. I mean, he wanted us rotating so he could speak with each one of us.
Oh, my goodness.
And then he made each one of them do a little talent scene. And so Linda sang the.
I sang the Eyes of Texas.
Good for you.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. No, that's been fun, folks.
Yeah.
I think we got about out of time.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
That time's up. But it's been
Thanks so
so
much.
interesting
It
and
has been.
enjoyable.
Yeah, we could go on for another hour, I think, and
No question about it. We look forward to seeing you on campus sometime soon.
Good.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
yeah, it's kind of, thank goodness for this warm weather we're now experiencing. So, I've got time to talk about what's on this week.
Oh, no, we're really, I
We're out
think,
of time. Okay, well, Jane Robichaud is
wasn't
going to
talking
play
about when it
piano
started.
tonight on 1890 at 7 o'clock. And then there's some good movies on during the week. So
Yeah.
everybody enjoy the warm weather now that the storm is over.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you.
Bye.
Here now.